They said he was too broken to be saved, a golden dog with eyes that had seen too much and trusted too little. No one could reach him, no voice could calm him, until a silent boy carrying his own invisible wounds sat quietly by his side. What happened next would change not just their lives, but the hearts of everyone around them. If you believe that healing can come in the gentlest forms through presence more than words, then stay. Like, subscribe, and follow this story to the very end. It just might change how you see love forever. The late autumn wind whispered through the bare branches of maple trees lining the quiet town of Ashford, Oregon. Gray clouds blanketed the sky, threatening rain that hadn't yet arrived. The air held a damp stillness particular to small towns on the edge of winter, quiet, uncertain waiting. Just off the main road behind a modest parking lot and a pale green gate sat the Cedar Creek Animal Shelter, its buildings weathered but sturdy. Inside, the scent of disinfectant, wet fur, and something lonelier lingered. Claire Bennett parked her silver minivan slowly and turned off the ignition, her gaze shifting to the rearview mirror. In the back seat sat a boy 6 years old, thin for his age, wearing a red fleece jacket zipped all the way to his chin. His name was Noah, and he had not spoken a word since coming into her care 3 weeks ago. Claire was in her early 40s, tall and slender, with auburn hair usually tied back in a neat bun. Her face, though kind, carried faint creases near the eyes, traces of too many sleepless nights, and too many stories that didn't end the way they should. As a full-time pediatric nurse and part-time foster mother, she had seen many children like Noah. Still, each one carved out a space in her heart. Claire's compassion wasn't loud or effusive. It came quietly in warm meals, clean sheets, gentle patience. She opened the car door, stepped into the cold, and then leaned into the back seat. "Come on, sweet pea," she said gently. "Let's go say hi to the dogs." Noah didn't move for a moment, then slowly unbuckled his seatbelt and stepped out clutching a small blue notebook in one hand. He had drawn in it every day but never showed anyone what was inside. The shelter's front desk clerk, Melissa, greeted them with a smile that faltered slightly when she noticed Noah's blank expression. Melissa was in her mid-20s with pink streaks in her dark hair and a clipboard permanently attached to her hand. She was brisk but kind, someone who loved animals more than small talk. Claire offered a brief explanation. "It's his birthday. First one, away. I thought the dogs might bring him a little joy." Melissa nodded, her eyes softening. "Of course. You can walk through the kennel wing. We've got some sweet ones today. There's a lab mix that loves belly rubs." They stepped into the first hallway. Barking erupted all around them, excited yips, hoarse howls, and the sharp cries of dogs pleading for attention. Noah's eyes flickered from cage to cage, but his face remained unreadable. He gripped Claire's coat tightly as they walked past a golden retriever, with one eye a three-legged mutt with a crooked tail, and a yappy chihuahua with a coat like espresso foam. Then he stopped. At the farthest end of the corridor, isolated in a kennel separated from the others by a blank stretch of concrete wall, was a large golden retriever. His fur, though still thick and honey-colored, looked unkempt, matted in places dulled by neglect. His eyes, one gold and one clouded with old damage, were sharp and alert. His name was written in red on the clipboard, Sonny. A warning sticker was pasted above it. Aggressive, staff only. Sonny didn't bark. He didn't lunge. He simply stood at the center of his kennel, watching. Claire's hand reached out instinctively. "That one's not." Before she could finish, Noah had let go of her coat and walked silent and slow toward the cage. Melissa saw him and rushed over, alarm rising in her voice. "No, honey, don't. That one's not safe." But Noah didn't pause. His footsteps echoed on the cement. He stopped a foot from the gate and crouched down, one small hand resting on his blue notebook, the other lightly brushing the bottom rung of the kennel bars. Sonny tilted his head. The motion was subtle, but it made every muscle in Melissa's shoulders tense. This dog had been brought in 2 months earlier after lunging at his previous owner during a custody dispute. He had bitten 2 shelter workers, broken his food bowl during a storm, and refused any physical contact since. His file was thick with incident reports. He had a date on the schedule no one liked to talk about. But now he was still. Sonny sniffed the air once, then slowly, cautiously lowered his large frame to the floor, paws extended, chin resting between them. His clouded eye blinked. Claire stood frozen. Melissa whispered, "What the hell?" Noah didn't say a word. He simply leaned forward, his fingers still outside the cage, and stayed there. And so did Sonny. No bark, no snarl. Just a boy and a broken dog sharing silence. Minutes passed. The shelter's background noise seemed to dim. Eventually, Claire walked up behind Noah and crouched beside him. "That's Sonny," she said more to herself than to the boy. "They say he doesn't trust anyone." Noah looked at her, really looked for the first time since he arrived at her home. Then he turned back to Sonny and gently opened his notebook. On the page was a crude drawing, a big dog sitting next to a small boy. No background, just two figures close together. Claire swallowed the lump in her throat. Melissa said quietly, "He's never done that for anyone, not even the head trainer." The sky outside had grown darker, and the first drops of rain began to tap on the roof of the shelter. Claire rose and spoke softly. "We won't stay long." But Noah didn't budge, neither did Sonny. And in that quiet corridor it became difficult to tell who was comforting whom. The rain had not stopped since their visit to the shelter. Ashford's narrow streets glistened with puddles, and the wind carried the scent of pine and damp soil through the town. Claire's windshield wipers moved in slow rhythm as she pulled into the Cedar Creek parking lot. Beside her in the front seat, Noah sat quietly hugging his blue notebook to his chest. It had become their ritual: school in the morning, a quick lunch, then a short visit to the shelter before Claire's afternoon shift at the nursing home. Sonny's kennel was always the same, tucked away in that quiet corner at the end of the corridor. The other dogs barked and jumped as they passed, but Noah never looked at them. His eyes sought only one. Sonny had changed, though, not in ways visible to most. He still didn't wag his tail. He didn't leap or bark with excitement. But when he saw Noah each day, he stood stretched and slowly walked to the bars of his kennel, waiting in silence. Noah would crouch again, knees pulled to his chest, his fingers resting against the cold steel. He never tried to speak. He didn't need to. The stillness between them said enough. Claire observed from a few feet away, leaning against the wall, sometimes glancing at her phone, but mostly watching. She had learned to respect the quiet between them. Sonny never growled anymore when Noah approached, his ears no longer pinned back. His breathing was calm. One rainy afternoon, Claire handed Noah a small sandwich bag as they exited the car. "Thought you might want to share," she said softly. Inside was a peanut butter cookie, slightly crumbly, but still fresh. Noah looked at it for a long moment, then gave a small nod. Inside the shelter, the air smelled of bleach and fur. Melissa, the front desk clerk with pink-streaked hair, gave them a quick wave. "Back for round 5, little guy," she asked with a grin, but Noah didn't answer. Claire offered a polite smile and guided him down the hall. Noah stopped in front of Sonny's kennel, as usual. The dog was already up waiting. Today, however, Noah did something different. After sitting down and letting his fingers brush the bars, he reached into his coat pocket and took out the cookie. He tore it in half carefully, then extended one crumbly piece through the bottom slot of the kennel gate. Sonny sniffed, paused, then leaned forward slowly. His tongue flicked out once. The cookie disappeared gently, his movements unusually delicate for a dog his size. Claire gasped softly, but Noah just smiled, a small, quiet curl of his lips. It was the first time she'd seen it. Later that day, Claire took her evening shift at Maple Hollow Care Home, a quiet facility nestled against the forested edge of town. It was a clean, sunlit place in the daytime, but often felt heavy with memories at night. Most residents were in their 80s or 90s, each with stories folded into wrinkles, silence, and old photo frames. One resident, Walter Hensley, sat alone in the recreation room, flipping slowly through a weathered leather sketchbook. He was in his early 70s, broad-shouldered despite the years, with thick white eyebrows and a shock of gray hair combed straight back. A retired Navy mechanic, he walked with a limp and rarely spoke unless necessary. Most nurses found him intimidating, but Claire treated him with the same quiet warmth she offered everyone. "Evening, Walter," she said, placing his evening tea on the table. He grunted, eyes still on his sketchbook. "That boy? He's your foster, isn't he?" Claire blinked. Walter usually said nothing about her personal life. "Yes," she replied slowly. "His name's Noah. He draws," Walter said, without looking up. "I saw him last week in the lounge. Drew a dog. Big one. Golden." Claire nodded, surprised. "That's Sonny, a dog he visits at the shelter." Walter finally looked at her. His eyes were sharp, observant. "He draws that dog a lot. I think it's his way of processing," she replied gently. "He doesn't talk much, but he draws constantly." Walter closed the sketchbook with a sigh. dogs remember pain, but they also remember kindness. His voice, gravelly but steady, carried a strange softness. Claire smiled. That's what I'm hoping for. Back at home, Claire made a point of checking Noah's notebook after he fell asleep. He never minded. His drawings were his only form of dialogue. Tonight she found something new, a picture of Sonny lying beside a small boy. But this time the background was different. A living room, a rug, a window with raindrops. He wasn't just drawing what he saw. He was drawing what he wished for. The next day the rain lightened. At the shelter, Melissa met them with surprising news. Sonny's been calmer lately. We moved his kennel closer to the front today. Figured it might help socialize him. Claire looked down at Noah, uncertain how he'd take the change. But the boy didn't seem worried. He simply walked toward the new spot and found Sonny already there, lying in a more open space, less shadowed, closer to the world. Melissa added, "There's been talk about doing a trial pairing just for a few hours. Supervised visits outside the kennel." Claire raised her eyebrows. With him, Melissa nodded. "If anyone can reach that dog, it's your boy." Noah and Sonny sat quietly together again. But this time, Claire noticed something different. Not just the trust, but a kind of mutual waiting, as if both of them knew something was about to change. The morning fog hung low over Ashford as Claire pulled into the shelter parking lot, the sunlight struggling to break through a sky that looked like wet paper. Fall had turned the town into a canvas of rust and gold, and the air carried a chill that curled around the ankles like a stray cat. Claire wore her usual navy wool coat and a thick gray scarf she knitted during her last winter shift. She moved with a deliberate calm, but inside her thoughts were stirring. Inside the Cedar Creek shelter, there was a shift in the atmosphere. Sonny's kennel had been moved to a more central spot near the administrative wing, and the change in his behavior was becoming impossible to ignore. Volunteers no longer whispered warnings as they passed. He still didn't bark or play, but he also didn't growl, and every day when Noah arrived, Sonny would walk calmly to the bars, sit down and press his head gently to the steel until Noah sat too. Melissa met Claire near the front desk, a clipboard hugged against her chest. Her usual energetic demeanor was softened today. "We've been watching how things are going," she said, eyes flicking toward the hallway. "That dog's a different creature when he's around your boy." Claire nodded. "I've noticed. So here's the thought." Melissa continued, glancing over her shoulder. "We've done supervised visits for trauma dogs before, 1-month trial placement. It would be your responsibility, and we'd check in weekly." Claire blinked. It was something she had hoped for, but not this soon. "Noah hasn't even asked," she said carefully. Melissa smiled. "He doesn't have to. He's already chosen." Claire drove home that afternoon, in silence, the radio off Noah, watching the road with his usual quiet curiosity. When she pulled into the driveway, she turned off the ignition, but didn't move. "Noah," she said softly, "how would you feel if Sonny came home with us for a little while?" He turned to her slowly, his eyes widening, and for the first time in weeks, he nodded without hesitation. Then, to her surprise, he smiled, not wide or wild, but soft and real. The preparations began immediately. Claire reached out to Dr. Emily Reyes, a local veterinarian with a reputation for handling trauma cases. Dr. Reyes was in her early 50s with sun-browned skin and thick salt and pepper curls tied back in a bun. Her eyes were sharp but kind, and she had the measured tone of someone who dealt with panicked animals and panicked owners in equal measure. She made a home visit 2 days before the trial period began, inspecting the house with gentle precision. "Good layout," Dr. Reyes said, scribbling in her notes. "Quiet neighborhood. Low external triggers." She glanced at Noah, who stood barefoot by the living room window, holding his notebook. "And he's calm, calmer than I've ever seen him," Claire replied. "I'll drop by once a week," the vet said, snapping her clipboard shut, "and if he regresses, call me anytime." When Sonny finally arrived, it wasn't dramatic. He stepped out of the van with a slow gait, sniffed the walkway, and padded silently into the house. His tail didn't wag, but it also didn't tuck. He moved through the rooms cautiously, his body language alert, but not afraid. When Noah sat down on the carpet, Sonny circled him once, then lay beside him and placed his heavy head in the boy's lap. That night, Claire stood in the doorway of Noah's room, watching them. Noah was curled up on the mattress with a blanket pulled to his chin. Sonny nestled against the bed frame like a silent sentinel. Claire didn't move for several minutes. She didn't want to break whatever magic was holding the two of them in that delicate balance. The next day, Claire brought Sonny with her to work. Maple Hollow Care Home had a modest pet therapy policy for certain residents, and she had arranged a short visit with Walter under strict supervision. When she walked in leading Sunny on a soft brown leash, Walter was sitting in his usual chair by the window, sketchbook open, but his eyes far away. At first, he didn't look up. Then he saw the dog. His back stiffened. "That yours, Noah's, technically Claire," said, voice low. "Trial period." Walter stood slowly placing the sketchbook on the table. His hands trembled slightly and his voice dropped to a whisper. "He looks just like Charlie's dog." Claire tilted her head. Charlie Walter didn't answer at first. His eyes had gone somewhere else entirely. Finally, he nodded once. "My boy." He served 2 tours, came home different. Never let anyone close except his dog, a golden, big and quiet. Just like that one. Claire remained still, letting the weight of his words settle. Walter blinked hard. He didn't make it. Not really, and neither did the dog. He stopped eating after Charlie. He trailed off, shaking his head. Sunny, as if sensing something beyond words, stepped forward. He sniffed Walter's hand, then pressed his head gently against the man's knee. Walter exhaled slowly, his fingers grazing Sunny's fur. "You sure this isn't him?" Claire gave a sad smile. "Maybe it's someone new, bringing a little piece of the old back with him." After that day, Walter began asking when Claire and Sunny would visit again. He started sketching more, not just ships and mechanical diagrams, but dogs, sometimes Noah too. His tone softened, and the nurses began to notice. Back at home, Noah's transformation was equally quiet but profound. He now slept through the night. He no longer flinched at the sound of the vacuum cleaner. He even started humming under his breath when drawing. His pictures showed more than dogs. Now he drew living rooms, open windows, sunlight through the trees, and always Sunny beside him. The wind in Ashford had sharpened. November crept in like a quiet stranger, and with it came long nights and brittle air. The leaves had mostly fallen now, leaving the trees skeletal against the dusky sky. Claire adjusted her scarf as she stepped out of her car, the porch light flickering above the front door. Her nursing shifts had stretched later in recent weeks, and the weight of responsibility pressed more heavily on her shoulders with each passing night. But the house was different now, quieter, steadier, more alive, because of Sunny. Inside, Noah and Sunny were curled up on the living room rug. The boy's small frame was draped under a patchwork blanket, his head nestled on a throw pillow. Beside him, Sunny rested with one paw just touching Noah's shoulder. The dog's chest rose and fell with a rhythm that matched the boy's. Their breaths synced like a pair of old friends who never needed words. Claire smiled to herself, stepping softly so as not to wake them. She had installed a motion sensor nightlight in the hallway and removed anything that made sharp sounds, metal keychains, ticking clocks, even the microwave's beep. The house had become a sanctuary of softness. Yet, despite this calm, the past clung like morning fog. Sunny was doing well, but not without moments of shadow. The first came a week into the trial. It was a Friday evening, and Claire had gone to retrieve laundry from the basement when she accidentally knocked a flashlight off the shelf. It clattered noisily to the floor, and the beam shot across the dark wall in a quick arc. Sunny, who had been lying peacefully under the kitchen table, jumped to his feet. His body went rigid tail, tucked tightly beneath him. His eyes widened with alarm, and he scrambled into the hallway, pressing himself into the wall with a force that shocked Claire. He didn't growl or bark, he just trembled, as though that sliver of light had reached back into some memory he couldn't escape. Claire didn't move immediately. Instead, she crouched where she was, voice low and calm. "It's okay, Sunny. It's just a flashlight. You're safe." After long minutes, Sunny slunk back into the living room, visibly shaken. He didn't touch his food that night. Claire noted the reaction in a small green notebook she kept, now one where she tracked Sunny's triggers and responses, a habit she had developed with foster children and now adapted for him. She jotted down, "Avoid flashlight. Sudden light or sparse fear." No aggressive response, just panic. 2 nights later, Noah had his first nightmare. Claire had been working a double shift at Maple Hollow. Noah, under Sunny's watch, had gone to bed early after reading a picture book about space. Just past midnight, the house erupted in a sudden piercing cry. "No, no, stop." Claire dropped her bag and sprinted down the hallway. When she burst into the bedroom, she found Noah tangled in his blankets, tears streaming down his cheeks, fists clenched, screaming into the dark. But it wasn't Claire who reached him first. It was Sonny. The dog had already climbed onto the bed, placing his head gently on Noah's chest. Not pawing, not licking, just resting there with the same pressure one might use to anchor a kite caught in wind. Noah gasped, hiccuped, and slowly stopped crying. His hands uncurled. His eyes blinked open, locking on Sonny's gentle gaze. Claire stood in the doorway, stunned. She said nothing. There was nothing to add to the wordless language already taking place before her. The next morning, Claire made pancakes in the shape of dogs, lopsided but earnest. Noah ate without protest. When she kissed the top of his head before school, he didn't pull away. From that night forward, whenever Noah whimpered in sleep, Sonny was already there before anyone else. Some nights, he slept beside the bed. Other nights, he curled himself into a ball at the foot of it, always watching, always listening. At Maple Hollow, Claire shared some of this with Walter over coffee during her late-night break. The old man sat at his usual table near the corner window, wearing a faded Army Air Corps sweatshirt and thick reading glasses perched precariously on his nose. He calmed the boy, Walter asked, stirring sugar into his tea. Every time Claire replied, without fail, "I don't know how he knows. He just does." Walter nodded slowly. Dogs are better at reading people than we give them credit for. They don't see the mask. They see the wound. Claire looked at him with quiet respect. "What about you? Any nightmares lately?" Walter chuckled, the sound dry and hollow. "Only the usual. But I started drawing again. Not just boats now. I drew Sonny yesterday. Gave him a pilot's cap." Claire laughed genuinely. "He'd hate that." Walter's smile reached his eyes. "I'm not drawing for the dog. I'm drawing for the kid. It helps somehow." That weekend, Claire took Noah and Sonny to a nearby lake trail. The wind off the water was crisp, but the sun was generous. Noah walked with small, careful steps, while Sonny padded beside him, leash loose, tail calm. They stopped by a bench overlooking the water. A woman nearby, tall with striking gray-blonde curls and an energetic border collie, smiled at them. Her name was June, a local landscape photographer who recognized Claire from the hospital bulletin board. "He's a beautiful dog," June remarked, her tone warm. Golden Claire nodded. "Rescue, still recovering." June crouched slightly, offering her palm to Sonny, who sniffed politely, but then turned back to Noah. "He's loyal," she said. "One person kind of dog." Claire smiled. "Exactly." They chatted briefly, and before parting, June offered to send Claire a photo she'd snapped of Noah and Sonny by the water, two silhouettes against ripples of blue. That night, Claire printed the photo and placed it on the fridge. Under it, she scribbled a caption in blue ink, "You don't have to be whole to be home." The days grew shorter in Ashford, and the sky now shifted to twilight by late afternoon. Light seemed to drain from the streets earlier each day, but inside Claire's home, warmth lingered. It lived in the hum of the kettle, in the soft thud of Sonny's tail when Noah walked into the room, and in the quiet comfort of pencil scratches echoing from the end of the couch where Walter now sat most afternoons, with a sketch pad balanced on his lap. Walter had become a regular visitor ever since Sonny's first trip to Maple Hollow. The staff had noticed the change immediately. The once withdrawn veteran now requested outings. It wasn't common for residents to leave the home for reasons outside medical visits, but Claire had pulled a few strings, arguing the therapeutic value of time, outside, and artistic stimulation. The phrase had made Walter roll his eyes, but he'd gone willingly. Walter was in his early 70s, his posture slightly hunched from old injuries, his beard trimmed but uneven, like he had stopped caring about symmetry a long time ago. He wore flannel shirts with the sleeves rolled past his elbows and carried an old metal thermos with coffee that tasted faintly of motor oil. His gruffness concealed a kind of protective gentleness, one that surfaced more each time he sat beside Noah, in silence, sketching while the boy colored with crayons. One Friday afternoon, with rain pattering lightly against the window panes, Walter looked up from his sketchbook and said, "You know, Charlie used to fall asleep only when his dog curled up next to him. Didn't matter how bad the noise in his head got, if the dog was there, he could breathe." Claire, seated at the dining table nearby, turned to face him. "You never told me his name before." Walter didn't look at her. He kept his eyes on the page. "Charlie. He was 28 when he passed. Afghanistan did something to him, something I couldn't fix." There was a long pause. "And his dog?" she asked gently. "A golden." "Just like Sonny," he said, voice low. Name was Baxter, that dog. He knew more about Charlie's pain than I ever did. I used to resent him for that, but now I think he just translated what I couldn't understand. Noah had been listening from the floor, his head resting on Sonny's back. At Walter's last words, the boy reached over to his crayon box, pulled out a dull gray stick, and began drawing slow, intentional lines on a fresh sheet of paper. Walter watched his voice softer now. When Charlie died, I stopped drawing. I stopped doing anything that reminded me of movement. But a week ago, I started again. Not because I wanted to, but because that mutt of yours kept looking at me like I should. Claire smiled faintly. He's good at that. Walter leaned back and set his sketch pad on the coffee table. The pages fluttered slightly. I'm thinking of putting these into a small book, not for publishing, just for keeping. A kind of tribute. Stories about people who don't speak much, but carry whole worlds inside. Claire looked up from her paperwork. A book about silent souls? Exactly, Walter nodded. I'd call it The Quiet Kind. Each sketch a face, a memory, maybe a few lines of writing beneath. Not flowery, just true. Claire glanced at Noah. Would you include him? Walter looked at the boy for a long moment. He'd be the cover. That weekend, Claire took Noah and Sonny to the library for a children's story hour. The librarian, Mrs. Estelle, was a woman in her 60s with short silver hair and half-moon glasses perched on the edge of her nose. She dressed in sweaters that looked like they had been knitted by generations of book lovers and had a voice that warmed the coldest silence. She greeted them at the door with a smile. I've been hearing about you two, she said, motioning to Sonny and Noah. You're becoming quite the story yourselves. Claire chuckled. We're just here to listen today. Estelle nodded and gestured toward a corner rug surrounded by beanbags and shelves filled with worn picture books. He can stay, she said of Sonny, long as he doesn't interrupt the dragons. Sonny lay down beside Noah, resting his chin on the boy's shoe. Children gathered, some wide-eyed at the dog's size, but none afraid. When the story began, Noah listened intently, his hand resting quietly on Sonny's ear. Back home that night, Walter arrived with a small cardboard box. Inside were pages of rough sketches, faces of old men, boys, even a dog with a crooked ear. He placed the box on Claire's kitchen counter. I need your help, he said. You're better with words than I am. I doubt that she replied. Walter scratched his beard. Still, I'd like to write about Charlie, about Baxter, about Noah. I think there's something in them, something people need to remember. Claire nodded, her voice soft. I'll help you. Walter opened one page and laid it flat. It was a sketch of Noah sitting on the living room floor, head bowed slightly, a pencil in his hand, and Sonny curled beside him. There was no background, just the two of them in a moment of stillness. He slid it toward Claire. This is the first page. Noah wandered into the room, peered over the counter, and smiled. It was small and crooked, but it was real. Walter smiled back. Hey, kid, how do you feel about being famous? Noah shrugged, then placed one of his own drawings beside the sketch. Two dogs this time, one golden, one gray, sitting under a tree. No words, just lines and shadows and space. Walter studied it, then nodded. We'll make room for that one, too. It had rained all morning in Ashford, but by mid-afternoon, the sky had cleared just enough to tempt families back outside. The local park, a modest stretch of lawn and gravel paths shaded by old elms, held the golden light of early winter, filtered through bare branches. Claire held Noah's hand as they walked toward the picnic tables near the duck pond, Sonny trotting beside them on a loose leash. It was supposed to be a reward, a moment of normalcy. Claire had been on edge lately, though she didn't show it. Her eyes, always attentive, carried an invisible weight that hadn't been there weeks ago. The foster board was due to review her status in a few days, and with Sonny still on trial, she knew any small misstep could shift everything. But Sonny had improved remarkably. He no longer reacted to sirens. He responded calmly to commands. He even accepted gentle petting from neighbors. Noah had been doing better too. At school, his counselor reported he had started participating in art class, though he still didn't speak. At home, he was sleeping through the night, drawing more animals, and occasionally humming while he sat with Sonny. The transformation felt fragile like glass, catching the sun just right, beautiful, but breakable. They reached a quiet bench near the playground. Claire pulled out a thermos of warm apple cider and 2 paper cups. Sonny sat at Noah's feet, his head resting gently on the boy's knee, eyes half closed in comfort. That peace shattered in an instant. A voice rang out from the far end of the park, loud, slurred, aggressive. A man stumbled near the playground fence, shouting at someone unseen. His clothes were disheveled, his beard thick and untrimmed. He waved a bottle in one hand and flailed the other as he staggered forward. Children screamed. Parents gathered their kids and moved away quickly. Claire stood stepping in front of Noah, instinctively. "Let's go," she whispered. But before she could grab the leash, Sonny was already alert ears, pinned back posture tight. His entire body went tense, his hackles raised. The man stumbled closer. "What are you looking at?" he barked, pointing toward Claire. Sonny surged forward, a deep growl building in his chest. In a flash, the leash slipped from Claire's fingers. The dog darted toward the man, barking once sharp and loud. When the man flinched and raised his bottle, Sonny lunged not to maul, but to warn. His jaws clamped down for a second on the man's forearm. The skin broke. There was blood. Claire screamed, rushing forward. "Sonny. Off." The command was sharp, panicked. Sonny backed away instantly, tail tucked, his body language reverting to something fearful and ancient. The man collapsed to the grass, yelling profanities. A bystander was already on the phone with the police. Everything blurred. Officers arrived within 10 minutes. Claire tried to explain, her voice shaking as she held Noah close. Sonny stood behind them, unmoving, his head low. The man, whose name was Marvin Kellis, claimed he was just walking through the park. Witnesses told different stories. Some said he was aggressive. Others insisted he posed no threat. Regardless, there was a bite and protocol was clear. Animal control would need to take Sonny into custody for evaluation. Noah, pale and silent, refused to release Sonny's leash. "I'm sorry, ma'am," said Officer Darnell, a tall black man in his 50s with a gentle but firm tone. His badge was polished, and his voice carried experience. "This is standard procedure. He's not being put down. We just need to assess behavior. It's temporary." Claire's voice cracked. He thought Noah was in danger. "I understand," the officer nodded, "but we still have to file the report." Noah wouldn't speak. He simply crouched beside Sonny, arms around the dog's neck, refusing to move. It took all of Claire's strength to convince her son, her quiet, resilient boy, that it wasn't goodbye. When they returned home that night, the house felt gutted. Claire sat at the kitchen table, hands around a mug she couldn't drink from. Noah stood in the hallway for over an hour, staring at the spot where Sonny's bed used to be. Then he turned and walked into his room, closing the door without a word. The silence was unbearable. The next morning, Claire found a letter on her front step. The envelope was thick, old-fashioned, and smelled faintly of pipe tobacco. Inside, in careful, deliberate handwriting, was a note from Walter. "Claire. If Sonny is dangerous, then I suppose I am too. And Noah, and Charlie, and every person who's ever flinched at a sound no one else heard or barked back at a world that kept pushing too hard. The only thing truly dangerous is when people lose faith in each other, in redemption and second chances. Don't let this system turn you into someone who forgets what you saw in that dog. Walter." Later that day, Claire visited the shelter where Sonny was being held. Melissa met her at the back gate, looking conflicted. Her pink-streaked hair was tied into a messy bun, and her eyes were red-rimmed. "I argued for him," Melissa said. "But after an incident, even a minor one, it goes through the board. I need to see him," Claire said. Inside, Sonny was alone in a reinforced kennel. When Claire approached, he stood immediately. There was no wag, no whine, just stillness. He didn't understand why he was there. He only knew something had changed. Claire crouched, pressing her forehead to the bars. "I'm going to fix this," she whispered. "Just hold on." Back home, Noah still refused to draw. His crayon box sat unopened. At bedtime, he stared at the ceiling, his lips moving wordlessly. Claire leaned into his doorway. "We're going to get him back, but I need your help." "Can you do something for me?" Noah turned eyes wide. "Draw," she said softly. "Draw what you remember, what you believe." And for the first time since the park, Noah picked up his pencil. The courtroom was smaller than Claire expected, more intimate than the cold legal dramas she'd seen on television. Ashford's municipal court had a faded mural of the town's founding, painted behind the judge's bench, chipped slightly in the corners, and the old ceiling fans ticked rhythmically as if trying to ease the tension in the room. The air smelled faintly of paper polish and the collective anxiety of those who'd passed through its walls. Claire sat on the wooden bench, her back straight, hands folded around a stack of documents and printed photos. She wore her navy blue cardigan hair pulled neatly back, and though her appearance was calm, the slight quiver in her jaw betrayed the whirlwind beneath. Beside her, Noah sat in a gray sweater, clutching his sketchbook like a shield. He hadn't said a word since they walked in, but he hadn't let go of her hand either. Walter sat on Claire's other side, dressed in a pressed shirt that didn't quite hide the trembling in his fingers. He had shaved, which surprised everyone, and his expression was a quiet combination of duty and defiance. Across from them was a representative from the Department of Animal Control, a younger man named Ethan Granger. He was neat, composed, and perhaps too eager to make an example. With short sandy hair, a pressed suit, and a manner of speaking that was technically polite but emotionally distant, he represented the law, not the heart. The Judge Honorable Ruth Delgado entered just after 10. She was in her late 50s with olive-toned skin, cropped silver hair, and reading glasses perched at the tip of her nose. Known for her practical wisdom and intolerance for bureaucracy, she commanded the room without raising her voice. Her reputation was one of measured fairness, someone who could sense honesty beneath rehearsed testimony. "Let's begin," she said, her voice even. Claire rose to present her case. "Your Honor," she began, her voice steady despite the pulse in her throat. "I know what the file says about Sonny, but I ask you to look beyond paper. What he did in the park was reactive, not malicious. He believed a child was in danger," Granger interjected. "It was still a bite. There are standards for behavior, especially in dogs being considered for permanent placement." Judge Delgado held up a hand. "Ms. Bennett, please continue." Claire took a breath, then turned to the clerk and handed over a USB drive. "I've provided video evidence of Sonny's behavior during supervised sessions, particularly one involving a resident at Maple Hollow Care Home. The man in the video suffers from advanced Alzheimer's. Sonny calmed him during a panic episode without any training or instruction. I also have testimony from licensed veterinarian Dr. Emily Reyes stating Sonny exhibits protective but not aggressive tendencies." The judge signaled the bailiff who connected the drive. The room dimmed as the screen lit up. The video showed an elderly man trembling in a wheelchair, eyes darting in confusion. Sonny approached slowly, ears back, and gently rested his head on the man's knee. The shaking subsided. A voice, Walters whispered softly in the background. "He does this all the time now. It's like he speaks their language." When the video ended, Claire placed a folder on the table. "Noah's drawings," she said. "Each one is of Sonny. This child never spoke until Sonny came into his life. He hasn't stopped drawing since." The judge leafed through the pictures. They were simple but powerful sketches of a golden dog under the stars, curled around a child, walking beside an elderly man. Walter stood next, clearing his throat. His voice carried the quiet weight of a man who rarely spoke unless it mattered. "I buried my son 6 years ago. PTSD took him home and never gave him back. He had a dog. Golden like Sonny. That dog was the only thing that got through to him. When I saw Sonny with Noah, I saw Charlie again. But this time, there was hope." He paused. "If we take that dog away, it won't just be the boy who suffers. It'll be every person who ever needed something silent to understand what words couldn't fix." Judge Delgado leaned forward. "And your recommendation?" Walter met her eyes. "Give him a chance. Give them all a chance." After a short recess, Judge Delgado returned with her verdict. "I've reviewed the incident report video materials, professional testimony, and community input. Given the unique circumstances and the role Sonny plays in emotional stabilization, I will permit the dog to remain in Ms. Bennett's home under one condition: Sonny must pass a 30-day behavioral evaluation administered by the Cedar Creek Behavior Panel. If he completes it without incident, his adoption will be finalized." Claire exhaled, not realizing she'd been holding her breath. Noah squeezed her hand, his face unreadable, but his grip firm. As the courtroom cleared, Granger approached Claire, his posture more relaxed than before. "You built a good case," he said. "I hope he makes it through." Claire nodded. "So do I." The next day, Walter stopped by Maple Hollow's recreation room, a sparkle in his eye Claire hadn't seen before. "We're putting together a little event," he said, setting down a hand-drawn flyer. It read, "Silent Stories, a day of remembering with Sonny." The idea was simple. Residents would share brief stories from their lives, funny, sad, meaningful, while Sonny sat quietly among them. Noah would be present sketching each storyteller in his notebook. That's brilliant, Claire smiled. Walter shrugged. They've got stories. They just need someone to sit still long enough to hear them. And so, the following weekend, Maple Hollow hosted its first ever storytelling day. Mrs. Klein, a former seamstress with a mischievous smile, told a tale about sewing a wedding dress in secret for her best friend during the war. Mr. Alvarez, who had gone nearly mute for months, spoke briefly about losing his father's guitar in a house fire and the song he still heard in dreams. Through it all, Sonny lay on the rug tail, thumping every so often, letting each speaker lean down to touch him. Noah drew silently his pencil, moving with quiet purpose. Walter watched from the doorway, arms folded. "You know," he said to Claire, "I think this dog hears more than we do." Claire nodded, "And somehow he teaches us to listen." The first snow came earlier than expected in Ashford. It wasn't a storm, just a delicate dusting, like powdered sugar falling silently over rooftops, park benches, and the cracked sidewalk outside Claire's house. Morning light filtered through frost-lined windows, and for the first time in years, the house didn't feel temporary. It felt whole. Sonny was back. 30 days had passed since the hearing, and each day had been a quiet triumph. Under the observation of the Cedar Creek Behavior Panel, led by 2 trainers, a vet tech, and a behavioral psychologist, Sonny had not only behaved, he had flourished. He followed commands with a gentle attentiveness, reacted calmly to distractions, and maintained steady interaction with people young and old. By the end of the trial, the panel gave unanimous approval. On the morning of his official adoption, Claire prepared a small celebration in their kitchen. Balloons hung unevenly along the cabinets. A lopsided cake, half vanilla, half peanut butter, because Noah insisted Sonny liked that flavor, sat on the counter. A paper sign colored with Noah's crayons read in uneven but earnest handwriting, "Welcome home, Sonny." Claire had taken the day off. She moved around the kitchen in fuzzy socks and an oversized sweatshirt that had once belonged to her brother. Her hair was loose, and her face, though tired, radiated quiet joy. She glanced out the window to see Noah and Sonny playing in the backyard. The snow wasn't deep just enough for footprints and wagging tails. Noah, now 7, had changed in ways words couldn't fully capture. His posture was taller, his steps had purpose. At school, he answered questions in short, soft sentences. During therapy, he told the psychologist, "I'm okay," when asked how he felt. It wasn't performative, it wasn't scripted, it was real, and he said it with Sonny by his side. Dr. Ellen Harrow, the child psychologist who had followed Noah's progress since placement, visited that afternoon. She was in her early 60s with copper-rimmed glasses and long graying curls tucked into a green wool beret. She carried herself with calm confidence and always smelled faintly of lavender and old paper. Her voice was slow and melodic, never rushed, never sharp. After greeting Claire at the door, she knelt to stroke Sonny, who nuzzled her coat gently. "He remembers me," she smiled. Claire nodded. "He remembers everyone who didn't give up." Ellen sat with Noah at the kitchen table, while Claire stepped into the hallway. Through the cracked door, Claire listened just enough to hear Noah speak in full sentences. About school, about the snow, about how he drew a comic book where Sonny was a superhero that saved kids from nightmares. Claire's eyes blurred. Later that evening, Walter arrived, a small box tucked under his arm. He was dressed neatly in a sweater vest and slacks, his hair combed carefully, and a new cane in his hand carved with a dog paw pattern Noah's doing. He handed the box to Claire. "It's done," he said simply. Inside was a thin, beautifully bound book. The cover was a deep matte charcoal with a gold-embossed title, "The Boy Who Heard the Silence." Below it, in smaller print, words and drawings by Walter Hensley and Noah Bennett. Claire opened the first page. A sketch of Sonny and Noah side by side in front of the courthouse. The pages that followed included portraits of the residents at Maple Hollow, short reflections, some poetic, others stark. One page held a letter Walter had written but never sent to his son. Another featured a full-color drawing by Noah of Sonny standing between 2 shadows, one shaped like a man, one like a child, his golden fur glowing. Claire turned to the last page. It was a full-spread drawing. A young boy and a golden dog sitting on a hill, backs to the viewer, looking out at a vast purple-orange sunset. No fence, no leash, no words, just presence. Walter cleared his throat. "We're donating copies to the shelter and to the school and the care home. Maybe more if people want it." Claire looked at him, then at Noah, then back again. You do know this is going to mean something to people, right? Walter gave a small shrug. Maybe, maybe not. But it meant something to me. That night, as snow began to fall again, Claire tucked Noah into bed. Sonny jumped onto the foot of the mattress, curling into a protective curl tail, tucked under his body. Noah looked up at her eyes, calm. Mom. Claire's breath caught, but she kept her smile steady. Yeah, sweetie, I want to write a second book one day, about kids who are scared, but they find someone who listens. Claire leaned down and kissed his forehead. You already wrote it. Later, when the house had fallen into sleep, Claire walked into the living room, mug of tea in hand. The fire in the hearth had turned to embers, and outside, the wind had softened. She sat down and opened the book again, tracing the title with her fingers. In a world loud with judgment, grief, and endless noise, a boy who once couldn't speak had heard something quieter, and because of that, others had begun to listen too. Sometimes the most broken hearts don't need fixing. They just need to be seen, held, and loved without question. This story isn't just about a boy and his dog. It's about all of us searching for a place where our silence is heard and our fears are safe. In the quiet between them, they found healing. Maybe you can too. If this story stirred something deep in you, please share it with someone who needs it. Leave a comment and subscribe to stay with us. Have you ever found comfort in an unexpected bond? We'd love to hear your story in the comments below.